Man, what fun. Chapter 14, The Sixth Sense, as we are using material from Think and Grow Rich to facilitate this 30-minute mindset morning today. So that being said, guys, man, can't wait to hear what you have to say. I got a bee that's decided to hang out with me today, so this will be entertaining. And by all means, it's your room as always. So what are you pulling from chapter 14? I got the attendee list up. Who's got first comments?
Oh boy, I guess y'all have nothing to say today.
Jump on it, client. You
All
know,
right.
I'll wait as long as it takes. What do you got?
So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but one of the things that I was challenged by was it kind of, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of like in my faith structure, you have particular care in not speaking to someone who is dead. And so I kind of was a little challenged about that. So I was wondering, did he feel like he was actually speaking to those individuals, or what? Does anyone have any take on that, or any enlightenment on that for me?
Yes, very specifically, because what he labeled this group as was his imaginary cabinet. So he wasn't thinking he was speaking truly with the individuals. He wasn't talking about, I am going to commune with the dead. He said, I was going to create this likeness in my mind, this imagination, and then see where my imagination takes the conversation. It's one of the interesting things, client. When your children were young, and they had imaginary friends, when they were imagining things, when they were being creative, were they violating the faith?
No, not in that context. And my wife told me she had a whole imaginary friend, now that I think about it. I forgot the name that she called her, but she had a whole friend.
So again, if it's okay for our children around us to play in this imaginary space, why do we as adults continue to lay upon ourselves all this dogma and story that we're not allowed to do it? I mean, you look at guys, as I was reading this chapter, I'm thinking, Elon Musk, what does he have in this imaginary council? You and I both know that guy dreams. He turns it loose, and I don't see any of that being in misalignment with most faiths. Now, there were some things in here that were interesting to deal with challenge-wise on those, and we'll see if they come up. And yet, client, for you and anybody else that's throwing up these man-made barriers, because they are, I challenge you to set them down. Jeanette, the floor is yours.
I just wanted to say, agreeing with you on the imaginary. No, don't talk to the dad, but because that doesn't go well. But that's called seances and things like that. But when you're talking, reading the books, reading through the history books and the different things like that, that's what we're doing. Is we're building on the history, and if we don't remember the history, as it says, it will repeat itself. So we need to, on many levels, to be educated in these things, and that's education, because we don't have to recreate this wheel. We can build on it. We can learn the mistakes, and our imagination is. It's a place to grow. There are principles of healthy ways of doing it. But going to sleep at night, we've already talked about that extensively for months, where you think through the characters of what your Senior imagination, he says, the group of people see around him. So he's remembering things that he's read and talked to, and as he studied. So bringing those in is um, it's counsel. That's why we read books. That's why we're doing counsel right here. With
But
using
the
this book.
interesting part again is we kind of loop this back is for some of you in here, this chapter and some of the other reading might have a mysticism woo-woo feel to it. And the intriguing part is maybe, just maybe, some of those historical, mystical woo-woo perceptions were actually accurate. You know, I've had a lot of fun of being able to hang out with Dr. Matt, NLP.com, spending time with him. And one of the things he brings into his NLP practice is Huna. Huna is the ancient mystic religion of Hawaii and is the only mystic religion that has survived through the ages. You know, everyone else got wiped out with theirs based on other people thinking they were smarter, they had more knowledge, whatever. And I would just challenge that maybe some of those practices of getting in touch with your own subconscious can do some really, really cool stuff. Julianne, what do you got, my dear?
Well, we did go over this on Wednesday, so this is fun to revisit it. This was, it's all based upon the energy. You know, your eyes have to be shut to take you out of the distraction of what's around you. These go step by step. He was rebuilding his own character, and he was pulling upon the resources of others. The energetic connection. So getting into that high vibe state and communicating, and he was doing basically what would Jesus do? He's like, also, hey, what would Lincoln do? He was pretty freaking smart. And this is the area. He was very directed. This is what I wanted to learn from Lincoln. This is what I wanted to learn from Emerson and Edison. Well, Edison was still alive. Ford was still alive. But it was really great that he basically found energetic mentors. He wasn't like calling upon the dead to come visit with him and raise him up like Lazarus. That's the physical body, and our spiritual energy is what makes people. We're just so that's why we are in God's image, is because we are energetic and we are. It's beautiful. Anyways, I like on this particular chapter. When the time comes, you will observe that life consists of great swarms of energy or entities, each as intelligent as human beings think themselves to be. These units of life together group like hives of bees and remain together until they disintegrate through a lack of harmony. So when we're talking, this is earlier in the chapter, it says, this is when Edison was telling you are destined to witness the discovery of the secret of life. So he's talking about the harmony of energy. And when there's harmony, it flows. And when there's discord, it disintegrates. And so therefore, that is why it is so important for there to be, number one, intention. There has to be a task at hand, because bees are busy with tasks. They have a very short life, and they do a freaking lot of work in their busy short life. So I love that he kind of talked about a hive of bees, because I do truly think that they're magical. And so the energy that was not only highlighted in my book, but also underlined with words circled, because I'm like, we disintegrate with the lack of harmony.
And I had that also circled, highlighted for me, because that harmony piece, let's think about this as a symphony. All these different instruments, all these different voices, they're musical voices, yet they're voices, kind of like this room. if you're not feeling the harmony, what are the odds you're actually in tune? I'm going to challenge each and every one of you that in any environment you're not feeling that harmony, that it's on you. And you've got two choices in that moment. Either adjust your tone, adjust how you're showing up to be more harmonious, or hit the eject button. And I will tell you, the eject button is the easier path. Really working to figure out your notes, your key, your voice, your tone. And I love that all of you, these 16 that I'm staring at today, you guys are committed to it. You're doing the work, you're showing up. And I know there's many times where I have challenged you. I hit you guys with something maybe bothersome, and you still stuck it out, shown up, and kept working. Celeste, the floor is yours. You got some road noise, so I'm going to let you go. And like Carrie, I saw you come in.
So I'm going to go ahead and just comment. There was a part in the chapter where he talked about how he had been getting counsel from all of the cabinet members. And then he had stopped the routine for a window of 6 months or so. And he thought that, it was just, he felt like it was necessary that he stop. And then, here we go. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's in a state of sleep, or at least he thinks he is. And he gets visited by Lincoln, and Lincoln gives him some advice. And it's the kind of advice that he's not even sure if it's real or if it's just imagined. But he woke up the next day with an understanding that not only does he need that counsel more than he thought, he then started adding more cabinet members, which I thought was like, if you didn't know the guy was sane, you would wonder if he was a sane person. But it was very powerful, because what it to me meant is that he was getting messages from the cabinet members in terms of that sixth sense that this chapter is actually talking about, where even though you don't think you're aware of their presence, they're speaking to you when you least expect it. And whether it's a counsel to say this is the right path, or this is the better choice of actions, they were speaking to him. And I just thought that was so interesting. That was my takeaway.
Well, the part for me as a
Like he's
coach,
freezing.
with the work I've done. By the way, are you guys hearing me?
Bye, coach.
Of course.
Yeah, he comes and goes.
So did anybody else read chapter 15 just out of curiosity and not 14?
I don't know the number.
I'm back now, I think.
Yeah,
It was
You
the
guys
chapter on
everybody can
Sixth
hear me now?
Sense. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Now we
Yes.
can't.
All right, awesome. I want to go back to the mindset brain piece, because I definitely was wanting to chat on that, because for me, at least, this is that subconscious going to work with story. So Maya brought Lincoln into the story. Your subconscious cannot not answer a question you ask it. So one of the great things about Napoleon Hill is he was constantly in curiosity. He was constantly in learning and asking himself questions and asking his subconscious questions, therefore. And when you sleep, that subconscious goes to work. When you get in that twilight sleep, it really gets to work. And so I'm going to challenge again, this imagination piece is allowing you to ask questions without the conscious filters. If if I planted the seed of you to ask yourself, what do I have to become to make $1 million in the next 12 months? Many of you would have your conscious mind go, well, you can't do that. Your drunk monkey would speak up and say, well, that's impossible. And when you get in that imaginary space, like a 5-year-old, anything's possible. And all of a sudden your subconscious starts kicking in the answers. So Julianne, I saw you, and then Jeanette, I see you, and I saw other people key in. So I want to make sure everybody who wishes to speak up and have a voice, by all means, gets to. And of course, now microphones are off. So
I was just gonna say that the like what you were talking about, the subconscious, and that's why our intention and the repetition is really important, because we need to train our subconscious to actually be, and a lot of the exercises that the author goes through is built, some of them seem very rudimentary, but they're so important. And they're the rudimentary things that we did when we were learning to walk. That baby wants to go grab the toy, and so that's all they're focused on. And they have such a narrow scope, and they're so focused on what they want, they achieve it. And they get better each time they go, and it's the repetition. And so that's why it's important to have your standards and your habits, and being a part of something that is going to make a difference. You don't necessarily have to know how, but you have to know why.
Absolutely, that big why matters, doesn't it, Julianne? Having the motivation behind it, not just running rudderless through life. Having a desire, a big desire that'll help lead you. Who else? That's pretty funny when my spouse goes, what, did the Wi-Fi go down because you guys are all quiet?
I mean, I can say something about it, but I just think that it's going to go too far. So I believe
there's no such thing in my world as going too far, Carrie. So
it's going to go too far. It's going to go too far. So when they're talking about the sixth sense and having all those and listening to that and things of the sort, the thing is that until you can get your fears worked out, and that's a lot of what they call shadow work, etc., then you won't be able to listen to it as well. And you have to just, like, you have to train your brain to do it, just like we talk about all the time. Once you get to that point and you don't have to worry about those fears like at least half as much, you'll be able to listen to your sixth sense or your gut or your heart or whatever you want to call it, God, whatever you want to call it. So, and then you'll be able to do that. And until then, that, I don't know, that's what I feel. That's how I feel about it. I don't know, maybe a little too far, but a little psychology in there.
Well, the only way it was, quote, too far, and I think it was right perfect, it teases tomorrow's content. Because the next chapter, the last chapter of this content that we are doing tomorrow, is all about the fears. Because you're absolutely right, Carrie. Those are the blockers. Those are the barriers, and they're all learned. That's the crazy part. These are all acquired fears, not innate fears, and we get to learn how to put those down and set them aside.
Right. We grow up with those fears, whatever our fears our family had before us, right? Unless someone's knocked that out, then it just continues that way until you realize it yourself and then get better.
Yeah, that's definitely a piece of where it comes from. Lots of different places. Jeanette, you're up, and then I saw Julianne kick on.
Well, everything that's learned can be unlearned. And as we start working through these, and we realize the value of them, working into, it replaces the fear. You don't have to even unlearn it. You replace it because you get more courage as you move in success, as you start moving in this greater wisdom. It starts to become who you are. So you don't have to replace fear. Fear isn't needed anymore because it gets replaced by wisdom. It gets replaced by success, and that's the whole process that we all go through. So the biggest step is taking the first step, so that so that we don't stop ourselves from even trying. We
I
Go ahead, whoever.
no, I just love what you said. Fear is not needed anymore. It is no longer of use. I do not think you realized how powerful of a statement that is, because so often we use fear as a blanket or something that's going to quote unquote protect us. And of course, if you're standing at the edge of a building and you're 6 inches off the Empire State Building, yeah, you might fall if a gust of wind blows you off. That's legitimate. But in case of what we're talking about, I have no more use of fear. Imagine how that is in if we were looking at that from our cold calling, where I have no longer use of having a fear of cold calling because it no longer serves me. I mean, that's some powerful stuff, Jeanette. Break that out a little bit more, please.
Well, I want to break it out and tie it into Julianne's concept of Big Y. So I want you guys to visualize out in your front yard. I have set 2 cinder blocks, bricks for those not in construction, big bricks on their sides. I put a 12-inch wide plank, 20 feet long between those 2. And for every one of you that walks across it, I'm going to give you $1,000. How many people are walking across that plank today, right now? Right? Okay. We're going to say the same plank. We're going to take the same 20 feet. We're just going to put it up 50 stories between 2 buildings. Now, all of a sudden, I'm seeing that people are.
Oh, he's frozen.
I think if he could see us, then if like doing a signal to him that.
I was going to say it's just a riskier choice. It's a risk. There's a risk now. There's a choice. There's a risk.
Is there a risk?
Yeah, there is.
Because okay, so there's a difference between falling 6 inches and falling 6 stories.
Yeah.
But is that truly, or is that? Oh, the word that I just.
I mean, I think we get what you're saying. It's a good point, except that you're still risking the life is still being risked, whether it's 50 or 1. And
Well, here was the key that I didn't get in because I broke up. Can you guys hear me again? Struggling with the internet here. Your building is safe. The building across the way is on fire, and somebody you love to save them and get back.
All right, so I'm
We
going to
have the story.
I think I got it.
Now the risk is gone.
The motivation changes.
That makes sense. The motivation changes.
I
Right.
can't hear you, Coach Russ, but I think that was Ann that probably said that too. I agree. I think it's like, so imagine, right, that you already practice walking across, right? You already know how to do it, minus the height, minus everything else. But now that is added risk, that you have to ask yourself, is that fear valuable, right? Or valid? Do I need the fear? Do I have to use it? Do I activate that? Or like Julianne said, do I even need to make that exist in my mind? Because if you've already practiced, right, now that the fire is burning, you're like, well, of course you're thinking about so many things right in that split second. But I think the motivation is so great that you're like, to hell with it. It's either like the book said, either we're gonna do it or we're gonna die, right? And in that situation, if you don't do anything, you're gonna die. That's like that concept what they say, if you're not growing, you're dying. So it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, yeah, the risk may increase and the other obstacles be presented, but you still have that same question. What are you going to do? Are you going to let fear consume you and stay still and burn? Or are you going to be like, you know what? I'm going to try to make it across. And if I fall, I do. And if not, I'll be alive.
Well, and I think what Russ was saying that wasn't getting picked up on there, I feel like what he was trying to say that the Wi-Fi was popping out was you have that same span, you have that same setup, except you're on one building and someone you love is on the other building and that building is on fire. Do you now make that walk across? Of course you make that walk across. You know, find the heck well you can make that walk across. Not only that, but you can pop that person who you love on your back and walk them across now too, because your motivation changed, because your risk for loss changed. Suddenly you're not talking about yourself falling, you're speaking about the person you love dying on the other side. Is that what you were saying, Russ? Yeah. So the person you love is on the other side. Are you gonna walk across, and do you give a crap about the $1,000? You don't care about the $1,000. You just know you're gonna walk across that and you're gonna do it twice.
Right.
Yeah, and if you practiced, because you
Yep.
practiced when it was safer and less risky, and if you practiced, you know the way, you know how to put your feet one foot in front of the other, how not to look down at the ground. You know all these things because you've practiced and you've programmed yourself. Now it's a different other scenarios, but having faith over fear, because you're like, with the power. I mean, how many of us would say the most amazing prayers, the most heartfelt, connected, and pull upon the energy to get you across that board, right?
I'd be calling on my mom and dad to help. Y'all saying you don't like commune with the dead, but there's 10,000 sects in the world. Sorry, 10,000 sects in the world, and many of them historically have called on the ancestors. I don't know, if I got to walk 50 feet across a building to save my child, you bet I'm calling on my mom and my dad to be the ones helping
The
me there.
angels and the ancestors, they're
Hey,
all
I got my
energy.
ancestors. They here.
Mhm.
You know,
I
so
understand.
yep.
But I was the one thing I wanted to add before we closed out here was that creative borders crazy, and because that's what he was alluding to so far as after his counsels, he was talking about that's why he stepped away. He didn't want to be perceived as crazy, and really the bravery that we have as a child going through. He talks about the hero worship, and even though he went past that phase, he wanted to emulate. He knew as a child to emulate. So the age of hero worship, found himself imitating those who he admired most. And when he got older, he went back to that eventually, into a deep dive of his invisible counsels. He stepped away from it because he didn't want to be perceived. He thought it was getting to be too much. And then he was brought back to it when he was flatlining, per se. And my note, and this was, he doubted it. It came back to him. He went and sought validation from Edison, who simply told him, your dream was more of a reality than you may imagine it have been. That was it. And so he had the dream. He got the validation just as much as, when we're programming our subconscious mind, we get a plan. And then all of a sudden we think, oh my God, that's a little crazy. If nobody's told you you're crazy,
Yeah.
for wanting to do something, then maybe you're not pushing yourself hard enough and being creative enough and finding a new way to do things that's right for you and that can help all the other people who are a part of your clan.
If you're not getting told you're crazy, you're not dreaming big enough, period. So that
I
being
love
said,
that.
guys,
Wow.
conversation thing, I love that we're talking about that. We are 2 minutes over. Man, my biggest gratitude in this moment is how this mastermind carries it, even when my internet doesn't. So love y'all for making that happen. Guys, tomorrow is the final chapter of this content. And then Wednesday, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to have a recap on this with the current carrier of Napoleon Hill's work, or we're going to jump start right into chapter 1 of Radical Edge by Stephen Farber. So make sure you have this. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you've read it. Farber's going to be a December read every year about our leadership skills and how we grow those and get better. And I think Napoleon Hill is probably going to be a Thanksgiving read every year. Well, a November read every year as well, as this is material we need to continue to grind away on.